Dear listeners of Heart and Soul Gospel Ministry, this is Joseph, the host of Wake Up Call. When Jesus arrived in Jerusalem, ultimately to bear the death on the cross, he entered the city riding a young donkey. The Old Testament prophet Zechariah prophesied this scene over 500 years prior to that. He said, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." Zechariah 9:9. Jesus riding on a donkey, more specifically a small colt, demonstrated his humility. And we might also think that donkeys are inherently humble animals, because Jesus rode the donkey in humility. We might conclude that donkeys themselves are naturally humble creatures. But it turns out that donkeys are not as humble and meek as we might think. Despite their small size, they are tough and stubborn animals that do not always obey their owners. As such, they are also associated with foolishness. So when Jesus rode on a donkey, that was not because the donkey is humble. In other words, Jesus, being the King of Kings, purposefully chose not to ride an impressive horse, but instead rode this small and stubborn creature. This choice by Jesus holds a deeper meaning. Let us turn to the Bible for stories about donkeys. There is the story of Samson slaying 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. This unseemly tool used by Samson added an extra dose of humiliation on Israel's enemies. There is another significant story about a donkey involving Balaam in Numbers. In Numbers 22, we see Balak, the king of Moab, inviting Balaam, a diviner living far west near Euphrates, to come and curse the Israelites. God intervened and told Balaam not to accept the invitation. He told Balaam that the Israelites were his people and they were blessed. Numbers 22:12. Balaam therefore declined Balak's request. King Balak then sent higher officials with promises of wealth if Balaam would just come and curse the Israelites. Balaam should naturally remember God's instruction and turn down the invitation. However, Balaam went back to God one more time what he should do. That was if he was hoping God might change his mind and allow him to go because he was coveting the wealth being promised by Balak. This was quite absurd. God had already told him no, yet he asked again. Knowing what was in his heart, God allowed Balaam to go with a caveat. God made it clear Balaam could only say what God instructed him to say. Excitedly, Balaam set off early after saddling his donkey toward Moab with Balak's officials. On the way, we encounter this well-known episode involving the donkey. Seeing an angel of Yahweh blocking the way, Balaam's donkey stopped walking, filled with fear. Seeing his animal's stubborn behavior, Balaam struck the animal for disobeying him. The donkey saw the angel, but Balaam, with his heart filled with greed, could not see what the donkey was seeing. Even though he was a diviner, he failed to see Yahweh's messenger standing on the road with a drawn sword. The beating got worse and worse, and the donkey finally opened his mouth and spoke, "Am I not your own donkey, which you have always ridden? Have I ever behaved this way before?" This opened Balaam's eyes, and he was able to see God's angel standing there. Balaam was blindsided by greed. He could not see the messenger from God and behaved even more foolishly than his foolish donkey. Seeing God's messenger with a drawn sword, Balaam was terrified. He asked whether he should turn back if going forward would displease God. Through his messenger, God permitted him to go but reminded him to speak only the words commanded by him. God saw it necessary to reiterate this instruction given the greed in Balaam's heart. After this encounter, Balaam went to Moab and declared that he would say only what God would allow him to say. Balaam could not curse the Israelites. He only said blessings for the Israelites. He gave the blessings not once but 3 times. Further, he prophesied the coming of Messiah. In Numbers 24, it says, "The oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down with his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob, and the scepter shall rise out of Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab and break down all the sons of Sheth." Numbers 24:16-17. At this time, the Israelites had not yet entered the land of Canaan, and were still wandering in the wilderness. And Balaam's prophecy was not about the immediate future. Instead, it foretold the coming of King David, and, in the distant future, of the eternal king who would descend from David's lineage. Through the story of Balaam, we can learn an important lesson. The words that came out of Balaam's mouth were all God's words and prophecies. God spoke through Balaam. At a casual glance, that might make him look like a godly person. However, did Balaam's life reflect God's character? The answer is no. In fact, in the latter part of the story, we see his cunning and scheming nature. When Balaam realized he could not curse the Israelites, he advised King Balak how to lead the Israelites into sin so that they would bring a curse upon themselves. This scheme involved introducing Moabite women among the Israelite men, causing them to engage in immoral acts. Thus, even though Balaam was used as God's instrument, his life had no connection to God. Blinded by greed for wealth and glory, Balaam was unable to see what a foolish donkey could see. Balaam, who considered himself a prophet capable of seeing divine things, failed to see what even a donkey could see. What does the story of Balaam mean for us today? We proclaim God's word and the gospel of Jesus Christ with our mouths. But what matters is what occupies our hearts. Would it be possible that the wealth and glory Balaam desired are secretly rooted in our hearts also? Are we blind to what we ought to see, with our eyes darkened by greed? As someone who shares the gospel through broadcasting, I, too, wish to examine myself. Am I truly different from Balaam? Do my words align with my life? I pray for an honest and quiet reflection. Dear listeners of Heart and Soul Gospel Ministry, are you living a life wiser than Balaam's donkey? Are you able to see the things a donkey could see? If our eyes have been blinded by greed, may they be opened by the grace of the Lord. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above. Whether Christ is seated at the right hand of God, set your minds on the things that are above, not the things that are on the earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these the wrath of God is coming. Colossians 3:16. May we examine our faith, seek the things above rather than earthly things, and live the lives entrusted to us. I hope this will be true for myself and for our listeners. I will conclude here today and look forward to meeting you again next week this time. Goodbye.